And welcome to our reflection on the readings for yesterday, for the second Sunday of Trinity, from the prophet Jeremiah and from Matthew. So Jeremiah chapter 20, verses 7 to 13. Reading from the prophet Jeremiah. Jeremiah cried out, "O Lord, you have enticed me, and I was enticed. You have overpowered me, and you have prevailed. I've become a laughingstock all day long. Everyone mocks me. For whenever I speak, I must cry out, I must shout out, violence and destruction. For the word of the Lord has become for me a reproach and derision all day long. If I say, I will not mention him or speak any more in his name, then within me there is something like a burning fire shut up in my bones. I am weary with holding it in, and I cannot. For I hear many whispering, terror is all around. Denounce him, let us denounce him. All my close friends are watching for me to stumble. Perhaps he can be enticed, and we can prevail against him and take our revenge on him. The Lord is with me like a dread warrior. Therefore my persecutors will stumble, and they will not prevail. They will be greatly shamed, for they will not succeed. Their eternal dishonor will never be forgotten. O Lord of hosts, you test the righteous, you see the heart and the mind. Let me see your retribution upon them, for to you I have committed my cause. Sing to the Lord, praise the Lord, for he has delivered the life of the needy from the hands of evildoers." And from the Gospel according to Matthew, chapter 10, from the 24th verse. Jesus summoned the 12 and sent them out with the following instruction. A disciple is not above the teacher, nor a slave above the master. It is enough for the disciple to be like the teacher and the slave like the master. If they've called the master of the house Beelzebul, how much more will they malign those of his household? See, so have no fear for them, for nothing is covered up that will not be uncovered, and nothing secret that will not become known. What I say to you in the dark, tell in the light, and what you hear whispered, proclaim from the housetops. Do not fear those who kill the body, but cannot kill the soul. Rather fear him who can destroy both soul and body in hell. Are not two sparrows sold for a penny? Yet not one of them will fall to the ground, unperceived by your Father, and even the hairs of your head are all counted. So do not be afraid, you are of much more value than many sparrows. Everyone therefore acknowledges me before others, I also will acknowledge before my Father in heaven. But whoever denies me before others, I also will deny before my Father in heaven. Do not think that I've come to bring peace to the earth. I have not come to bring peace, but a sword. For I've come to set a man against his father, and a daughter against her mother, and a daughter-in-law against her mother-in-law, and one's foes will be members of one's own household. Whoever loves father or mother more than me is not worthy of me. And whoever loves son or daughter more than me is not worthy of me. And whoever does not take up the cross and follow me is not worthy of me. Those who find their life will lose it, and those who lose their life for my sake will find it. There is one thing that really leaps out for me from that gospel reading, something that maybe just a few weeks ago I would not really have noticed. Maybe just thought of it as part of Jesus' historic context. And it's this, that Jesus uses slavery to illustrate a point. He said this, a disciple is not above the teacher, nor a slave above the master. It is enough for the disciple to be like the teacher and the slave like the master. Verses such as this show the everyday normality of slavery when the Bible was written, but also, and more worryingly, they show the everyday reality of slavery throughout much of the church's history. So, for example, the Church of England inherited slave plantations in Barbados. And when the plantations were inherited, the Church of England ran them as slave plantations. They treated the slave just as harshly as any other slave owner. So 4 out of 10 slaves died within 3 years of arriving at the plantation. The lash was used, the iron collar was used, and the straitjacket also was used. And for a while, the slaves were branded with society across their chest because the plantation was run by the forerunner of the USPG, the United Society. The Church of England only gave up her slaves in 1833 when the Abolition Act was passed, and the Church received compensation for relinquishing the slaves. And again, if you go to Ghana, previously the Gold Coast, there's a chapel in a British slave fort, and the chapel is built above a dungeon that contained the male slaves. Literally feet away from the worship, there would have been the groans and the cries of those slaves in the dungeon. And many city institutions, and that's our context geographically, many city institutions have slavery as part of their funding history. And that includes schools and churches, as well as commercial institutions. But, I almost hear you cry, but Christianity is a religion of peace. Jesus, after all, is known as the Prince of Peace from a prophecy by Jeremiah. Jesus also preached love of neighbour. He said we should pray for our enemies. So how can Christians have allowed the abhorrent subjugation of their fellow human beings? Well, to address that reality, I think we have to understand the whole picture of the faith experience. If you've been following morning prayer recently, we've been working our way through the book of Joshua, and there is ethnic cleansing in the land of Palestine. Israel has come from Egypt and now is pushing out the people who already live in the land so that they could settle there following that flight from Egypt. There is violence against the original inhabitants of the land, and that violence is extreme. There's also social separation. Intermarrying is punishable. There's a clear understanding when you read that part of the Hebrew Bible that there is one race, one group of people chosen by God, and the other races, the other groups, can be dominated. And then we have that reading from the prophet Jeremiah, which is what we have also heard. At first sight, the passage appears innocent. It even appears beautiful, I think. Jeremiah says he was calling from God, so this is a prophet speaking to his Lord. O Lord, you have enticed me, and I was enticed. You have overpowered me, and you have prevailed. However, that word enticed could also be translated seduced. That word overpowered is the same word that's used elsewhere in the Hebrew Bible for rape. You could read that passage as, O Lord, you have seduced me, and I was seduced. You have raped me, and you have prevailed. Violence, if you like, hovers subliminally over the language of calling, rather like the violence of Herod hovered over the birth of Jesus as he pursued and then slaughtered the innocents. And then we have Jesus on the Mount, that Sermon on the Mount, and he preaches violence against the self. Pluck out your eye, cut off your hand. It's no wonder that Jesus says in our gospel today, do not think that I've come to bring peace to the earth. I have not come to bring peace, but a sword. For I've come to set a man against his father and a daughter against her mother, and the list of internal conflict goes on. It shows us, if you like, that religion can be used to justify violence, or religion can be used to make a choice for peace. And putting it in our current context, this is where Black Lives Matter is a deeply Christian idea. It is rooted, if you like, in that preferential option for the poor, that understanding that those that society does not bless, and we cannot assume, we cannot justify in any way that any equality of blessing in society at this time. So those that society does not bless are actually closer to a blessing from God. Jesus goes time and time again to those not blessed by society, to the collaborating tax collectors, to the outcast lepers, to the scandalous prostitutes, to the segregated Samaritan. Christians are called to those on the margins, to those who are excluded, to those whose cultures are alternative. Lives of people matter, particularly if they're not in the mainstream. Also, taking the knee, and it has to be a personal choice, otherwise it means nothing. Taking the knee is actually a deeply Christian symbol, from genuflecting to a higher purpose and meaning. Be it genuflecting to the consecrated bread in a tabernacle, or genuflecting the proclamation of the birth of Jesus at midnight mass. These are Christian images. And you've seen images also maybe of police officers washing the feet of protesters, consciously aligning the ideal of police service with a sacrificial, self-serving, self-giving service of Jesus. The Jewish Christian faith is a witness to nearly 3,000 years of struggle to comprehend God and to follow God. And like any human struggle, there is both love and peace, but also fear and violence. Which of the two is the most profound witness to the Judeo-Christian tradition? Well, just hear the words of Jesus. I came that they may have life and have it abundantly. Great, thank you for listening. Please feel free to post any comments on this YouTube channel. These occasional offerings will come because our main worship is by Zoom and therefore not widely shared. So thank you.